Bonjour tout le monde. So my presentation is in 8 points. The first slide will be about the work of the panel, which we commonly call the phase 1. The panel has worked, as I said, we've been on this since 2010, so it's 13 years of work that we will try to summarize somehow by grouping it. Then I will briefly cover the common African position on asset recovery, CAPAR. My sister Charity will be, or her boss, if she reaches us by then, will get into the details of that in the session in session 2, right after the coffee break. So I will just quickly talk about that by way of introducing what it means to us. There are advisory, many people involved in the work of the panel, and they have been grouped either in working groups that we bring in and phase out based on what they are meant to do, or we have some of them that are permanently there, depending on what the panel is supposed to do, or what our heads of state, African Union Assembly, request to do, and therefore we get organized to implement those. There is a quite extensive or elaborate way through which the institutions involved in this try to report back to the Assembly. I will talk about that. And the way we are also ourselves organized among ourselves. All of that, as far as we are concerned, is part of phase 1. And then we are now in phase 2. We started phase 2 of the work of the panel since 2022, basically, or 2021. Because of the pandemic, we had to start a bit later. And right now, and because everything that has to do with illicit financial flows is basically to improve transparency, accountability, integrity, we think that it is important that when you are engaging, people know who you are, where you come from, what you do, and who funds you. Because there is a lot that goes through programming and budgeting by way of improving things or maybe even going backwards. And right now, the 2023, I'm still on the outline, part of the 2023 retreat of the panel and its working group that was held 2 weeks ago in Johannesburg. There were a number of decisions that were made, and what we intend to do now for the coming probably year and a half is to intensify some of our work towards what we will commonly call Mbeki 2. For those of you who have not seen, when we talk about the panel, we really and its work, we are really talking about this report, which is almost a summary of what the actual report they have for almost 3 years consulting on the continent and outside. And we simplified the version of that report that is normally was about 500 pages. This one was the summary of that, and this is the one that the ministers of finance, economic development, planning, and the governor of central banks approved in Abuja in 2014. It then went to the heads of states in 2015. It became, and they passed it as a special declaration. And so when we say we are working and in the context of the African Union, we are all responding to that decision of the heads of state that they passed in January 2015 on the reports, the outcome of the work of the high-level panel. 15 findings, 38 recommendations, of which 24 at the national level. The same year, for the first time, the world basically came to Addis Ababa those who are concerned about how we will be financing our development somehow structure their conversations in the United Nations. And there is a conference that happens, I think, every 5 years, United Nations Financing for Development. So United Nations Financing for Development 3 was held in 2015, June 2015 in Addis Ababa. The outcome of that conference is what we commonly call the 4A agenda, the 4A Addis Ababa Action Agenda. Article 23 and 24 of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda basically endorsed and said what the African Union said about illicit financial flows is right. And this is what this, the SDGs, Agenda 2063, please, I am on the other one. Who went back again? Yes, please, okay. And so Article Indicator 16.4.1 of the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, was actually informed by the work of this panel and from the formulation that we retained. You remember there were heavy negotiations on every single aspect of that agenda, what we commonly call the Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. And from 2016, the main decision that the African Union took was a decision on the Common African Position on Asset Recovery. So what you're seeing on this slide is the cover of the high-level panel's report, which we commonly call Mbeki Study or Mbeki 1, and then the two heads of state level decisions that were made based on the work of the panel. Next slide. The Common African Position on Asset Recovery, I won't say too much. My sister is going to make that presentation after the coffee break. But just to say that the Common Position is actually a policy advocacy tool that we have proposed to our countries to trace, identify, repatriate, and effectively manage our assets, including cultural heritage assets, when they are recovered. There is a working group in place. Lately, you will see in some of these documents, working group. This is too disruptive. Can we just leave it? It's fine if they don't see it. Can the technician just leave the presentation where it is? It's okay. Okay. So they are privileging people behind the screens than those who are in the room. Now, the Common African Position on Asset Recovery Working Group was first a working group that formulated the CAPAR. Then it was turned into a working group that organized to position the African Common Position until we passed it. You can see there the then chair of the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, the current chairman of ICPC Nigeria, because Nigeria has a very unique role in this. They are the champion, African Union champion on anti-corruption. The third person who is there from the left is actually the deputy chairperson of the AU, the then deputy chairperson of the AU. Then you have in the middle President Thabo Mbeki, the former president of South Africa, and the chair of the high-level panel. We have Ambassador Adeoye, who is now Commissioner of Political Affairs at the AU, but then he was the ambassador, and myself as the secretariat. I will not go beyond that. My sister will go on. Will detail what's this is about. Next slide. The Technical Committee on Domestic Resource Mobilization, illicit financial flows as a challenge in the context of the African Union and at global level is positioned as an issue of domestic resource mobilization. If we were able to arrest or at least curb these flows, we should be able to fund and finance our development agenda and our aspirations. So because of the pandemic and a number of other global processes that we felt could be really detrimental and could send us back, because this continent has ownership and leadership on this particular agenda, we had set up a technical committee on domestic resource mobilization composed of former ministers, former governors of central bank, EDs of World Bank and IMF and African Development Bank, to make sure that we don't allow that a reversal, if anything, in the narrative of, because we had come a long way. So the Technical Committee on Domestic Resource Mobilization it has been set up to enable and support African countries, governments, to adopt and implement efficient fiscal policies as a basis for better resource mobilization. It helps both CoDA. CoDA is a platform for dialogue and debate. It's an instrument of the AU that is led by a board, and its board is composed of former heads of state, former ministers, prime ministers, and so on. So together with the other panel, with the panel that is also of the same level, led by a former heads of state, and where you can find prominent and renowned Africans dealing with these matters, they join their forces, and this technical committee provides the technical support and advisory support that they need to work with the governments. So the main thing that this group does is to boost African governments' capacity to adopt and implement efficient fiscal policies as the basis for better revenue collection, public expenditure management, and debt management. They have launched because as a response to the OECD decisions on taxation, the African Fiscal Policy Forum to unify African response to that. There was another flood process that they call the inclusive framework, that is everything but inclusive. Next slide. The current institutional arrangements for the implementation of the recommendations of the panel. When I started, I said that this report had 15 findings and 38 recommendations. So we have structured ourselves. I mean, when we say we, these are I'm glad that Ebrima and Don are in the room. We had started, we have collaborated since 2015 when the report came out, a host of institutions, but we are 17 in the consortium. So there is, as you can see, the high-level panel, and there is also the Coalition for Dialogue in Africa, and they share one secretariat that I head currently, that is the oval blue. Now, what contributes to the panel is what comes out of the work of a consortium. It's a consortium of 17 institutions and individuals, but it has a core group. Ibrahima Sal, Don Deya, Ibrahima Aidara, who is actually now a staff of OSF, and many of us are part of it. We are about 8 of us, of course, in 8 different institutions. And from within that consortium, we organize working groups. Whenever we wanted to deal with one aspect of the work of the panel, we reorganize ourselves in working groups until we deliver on something. So currently, we had about 5 working groups. The working group on CAPAR was one of them. We had a working group on extractives, a working group on national assessments, a working group on the trust fund, because we have been organizing ourselves and making sure that we fund and we are responsive groups. And then we had a working group on Amani. The last 3 have been phased out. They are now, what come out of the work of this work is now part and parcel of what we call the Secretariat's work. Then we are left now with a working group on CAPAR. The working group on CAPAR moved from a working group that developed the CAPAR to the working group that helped the passing of the CAPAR at the Assembly. It is now an expanded working group. In addition to the institutions, we have now 5 governments that are part of that working group. and my brother here, Don Dea, is the secretariat of that group, PALU. Because he's based in the same city where my sister Charity's outfit is, African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, most of what you will hear happening to that in this agenda will probably come from Arusha going forward. We have a working group on extractives, and that is really what Barrister Akere Muna is trying to structure again against what the scandal that happened last year. We had a working group that was really doing most of its work in academic work, and here we're going to see how we will apply it to what the EITI and TI are concerned about, because at the end of the day, this new scramble to the continent is about the resources. And if we have illicit financial flows that are way back when the panel studied, we were talking about 50 billion. Since then, both UNCTAD and UNECA came out with the recent studies, and we're talking about 80 billion and 100 billion respectively. 100 billion that leaves this continent illicitly yearly. I think that even if we were to arrest half of that, we wouldn't need development aid or debt. So it's a very critical issue, and we need to continue to be organized and structured and focused on it. As you can see, there is a technical committee on domestic resource mobilization that has a direct reporting line to the CoDA. That's why we call it technical committee, CoDA technical committee, but it has a dotted line to the panel because it was also set up to serve the panel. Next slide. On the reporting, as you can tell, at the top is the heads of states. At the end of the day, when we talk about African Union, we are really talking about what our heads of states decide and how we report back on our work. There is a host of institutions that are organized, and a lot of it happens just like a clock. Every year we have to produce these reports and go to them and see if they make a decision, and we implement these decisions. So on top of that pyramid, you have the Assembly of the African Union. You can see the green arrow that is coming to that one. The APRM is still, APRM Forum is also the heads of state, but when they organize themselves separately, and there is a reason why we had put also that one. But anything that goes to the African Union Assembly of Heads of States must go through the Permanent Representative Committee, the PRC, that is the body of African Union ambassadors accredited to the African Union and who validate and read, and then it moves to the ministers level. The Executive Council is actually the platform of African ministers of foreign affairs before it makes it to the heads of states. And the institution that all of us go through to get to that is African Union Commission. That's the executive arm of the African Union. And there are two departments in the African Union Commission that are dealing with illicit financial flows. One is Political Affairs, Peace and Security, and the other one is ETIM, Economy, Trade, Tourism, Industry and Mining. You can see on the left-hand side the outfit of my sister Charity. That's African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption. And then on the right-hand side, you have APRM. And we are bravely putting ourselves there. That is CoDA. We're still a child of that institution, but we are an independent outfit of the institution. Currently, our offices are within the African Union Commission, but we have been operationalized and we operate and function fully independently. But what comes out of CoDA's work must feed the processes and the procedures of the African Union as it was established and continues to work. Next slide. Phase 2 of the work. So everything we have done so far from 2015 that the panel's recommendations were adopted, we no longer call them high-level panel's recommendation. We actually call them African Union Assembly decisions. There are 38 decisions that have to be implemented, both at global level, actually at all three levels, global level, continental, and national level. And so if we were to group everything that has happened since 2012 to 2020, where the panel has been at work, the bulk of it was really to forge that narrative, to study the matter, and put it firmly on the agenda everywhere. No one talks about illicit financial flows without referring to what Barrister Rakere Muna and his group did. So I think Africa Union has done a great job on that one. Now, at global level and at regional level or any other level, you will do only advocacy. The real work has to happen at national level. It's always about national policy, whether we will translate these recommendations, decisions, standards into national policies, and we can reinforce their implementation is actually where the provision lies. So phase 2 has been launched in 2020, but only because of the pandemic, it took us a bit longer to get to see some work done. Right now, the high-level panel on illicit financial flows is firmly in phase 2 of its work at national level. Ongoing assessments of the status of implementation is ongoing in the following African Union member states: Algeria, Burkina Faso, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ghana, Lesotho, Malawi, Mauritius, Namibia, Nigeria, South Africa, Sudan, Tanzania, and Tunisia. Ironically, and it's a lengthy process through which we take our governments. We have to carry the whole government through the process, and it can take sometimes 4 months, sometimes 3 years, and we may have to restart the process each time, but we go through that. It's only Sudan report that has been fully validated during the transition period, but now that they reverted back to military regime and they are actually in full civil war, we are scared of getting to that stage in other countries. No, but joke aside, it's a phenomenon that can do that. It's a very heavy thing that really questions everything we do. Next slide. Quickly, we have now, as I said, we are very careful where we get our fundings from, because through budgeting and programming, a lot can happen, and to keep the full legitimacy, independence of the panel and its eligibility to do some of these things, we respect what we call the division of labor at regional level. At regional level, Pan-African institutions are organized in a way where, way back, I hope it comes back, ECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, will do policy research. African Union will study these things and pass the right decisions. And African Development Bank and Afrexim Bank will fund these decisions so that we go and implement them. And at least as far as the high-level panel on illicit financial flows and CoDA are concerned, that is how we continue to do it. So we currently, the bulk, we do have some funding on the side that comes, but our work is funded by African Development Bank and Afrexim Bank. And then, of course, we reach out to a few philanthropies institutions. I talked about my brother Ibrima Idara and Muthoni, who have been very useful and understand exactly what we do. So when donors come to us and want to fund our work, we tell them to take their money to the African Development Bank so that we can get it from an African institution that we can hold accountable and they're answerable to us. So we have lately launched a project. That's why Getachew was saying he's the coordinator. AFIAP is the African Financial Integrity Accountability Project. When Barrister Rakere Muna wants money, he just raises a bill to African Development Bank, asks them 22 million. Right now they told him, we don't think you have the capacity to absorb all of that. We'll give you 8 million. So that's the 8 million. For the moment, but he will go back to them and request another 40 million. We will see when the countries would want to act on it. Last slide. This presentation will be shared with everybody. I didn't want it to. So the last slide is really what came out of 2023 first working retreat of the high-level panel and its technical groups. It happened 2 weeks ago in Johannesburg, together also with the Technical Committee on Domestic Resource Mobilization. A number of important decisions were made, of which this that Birahim Sek was referring to start engaging. Extractive sector is the sector that contributes the most to illicit financial flows, more than 60% to illicit financial flows. So it is the heart of what we do, and it has to be monitored. There are two major instruments that are dealing with this, EITI, and we are here. We will talk about why we are here and why we are going to start and engaging these instruments. So basically, we are starting what we commonly call the processes of Mbeki 2. When we prepare a report, it is not just an academic exercise. We do extensively consult and follow a number of rules and procedures established by the African Union and the United Nations to make sure that by the time the panel tables something, not only our heads of state will take it up immediately, but the United Nations will have to listen to Africa. So the African Union High-Level Panel on Illicit Financial Flows and CoDA continues to advocate for more inclusive, transparent, international financial and trade governance systems that are fairer to African countries. We establish, as needed, the necessary platforms for presenting a unified African voice in this regard. And we aim to strengthen partnerships with continental and regional organizations, think tank, and research institutions. I hope this gave you a good overview of who we are, where we come from. I thank you very much. I will be able to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Sister Souad. I would like to ask your indulgence that we just have all the introductory remarks following that recap of the journey so far by Souad, and then we can have some brief discussion, question and answer, after Madam Ndiaye and Barrister Keremona have given us their presentation. And then just a quick, two quick things. One is in terms of time. Of course, I will request your cooperation that together we have a very disciplined way of managing time, but not to have too much regard for that technicality as to compromise the substance of what we want to do in the room. So we just have a good balance. In this place, we have a good balance. I believe that by the end of the day, we sort of should have recovered and balanced our time management. So therefore, I seek your indulgence that this session may go on up to about 11 o'clock, and then we can take a break so that we are not anxious about wanting to take the tea break at 10:30, kindly. And then finally, before Madam Ndiaye, my request to us who speak, give comments, even ask questions, is to keep anchoring this, what we say here, what we do here, in the reasons for situating this activity in Dakar, in this hotel, at this time. Why is it important that we hold this session on the sides of the annual conference of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative? Because it's at the core of what we would like to achieve with this activity. So even someone who asks a question, so you help us to probe, we push ourselves to ensure that, yes, there was a purpose for holding this session in this room, in this hotel, at this time. Thank you very much. Let me welcome Madam Sainabo Ndiaye to, is she here? Is the chairperson here, or is it Madam Charity who is? Oh, thank you. Madam Charity, please, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. The chair had detailed me that she may be coming much later, and I think as and when she comes, she'll be able to give her full remarks. But allow me to just indicate that as a board, we are very excited, we are very happy to be having these conversations as the EITI conference is ongoing, because we regard the matters that are being discussed as very, very critical to the core of what we do as a board. And it is key, like has already been indicated, that most of the illicit financial flows, they arise out of the extractive industry. And having been given a work with respect to the Common African Position on Asset Recovery, I think as a board we take delight in working with different stakeholders, both state actors as well as non-state actors, regional bodies on the continent, as well as other departments within the African Union. So we are happy that we are having this, and we hope and believe that the discussions we'll be having in the course of today as well as tomorrow will go a long way in sort of giving traction to the work that we are doing in our respective circles. You know that fighting corruption, fighting illicit financial flows is not a task for any one institution or any one individual. And so as a board, we value these various partnerships, the networks, and for the corrupt, I think their networks, they are sort of thriving, and they are doing very, very well, and they know how to coordinate and network. But I think for us, the practitioners, we need to perhaps do a bit more with respect to coordinating our various activities. I think there's a lot that has been happening, a lot that has been done, but sometimes because it's fragmented, the impact thereof is not felt the way it should be felt. So I think this meeting is one such gathering or intervention that will ensure that we are working together, we are enhancing our coordination, our cooperation in as far as issues of illicit financial flows is concerned. When you look at the African continent today, when you go the breadth of Africa and you see the impact of corruption on the livelihoods of the people, I think it makes you want to cry. And as stakeholders here, we have a key role to ensure that the resources that are generated on the African continent find their way back on the African continent, and they help to advance the livelihoods of the many people. Often when I speak in some of these meetings, I allude to the fact that there are a lot of African citizens right now who perhaps are even living in areas where electricity is generated and all that, but they don't have electricity in their homes. They just see the power lines over their homes, and it shouldn't be. We're a rich continent, and the resources should translate in livelihoods being improved for the people on the continent. And the more we deal with some of these issues, the more we arrest illicit capital flight, the better for us, the better for the African citizens whom we are all working for, I believe. And if we don't tackle these issues in a coordinated manner, like I indicated earlier, our efforts may not bear much fruit because they are fragmented and all that. So I hope, given the many work that has been done and the other work that is going to be done in this regard, we'll be able to come to a point where our various efforts, the coordinated efforts, are having a real impact in as far as transforming the livelihoods of people on the continent is concerned. So, let me end there, and hopefully my chairperson, as and when she comes, she'll be able to add more. Let me not take away from what you would have wanted to deliver to you. So thank you so much once again, and I wish you all fruitful deliberations, which I hope will go a long way in not only amplifying the various work we are doing, but also ensuring that its impact is felt. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Charity. Just at the moment when you were speaking about weaving a common thread through the interests and stakeholders of the fight to stem illicit financial flows on the continent, and therefore the importance of this being a multi-stakeholder approach. I saw a sign, the opposition trying to show us that they will bring us down. So we must show them that we must show them that through what we do, that we shall not be easily brought down. So let me welcome President Akere Muna to please give us his remarks. Mr. President, please.
Thank you very much. As you know, when you fight corruption, it fights back. So I must firstly recognize the presence of my brother and friend, the Director General of ONRAC, which is Senegal's asset recovery outfit. He's been very important in the contribution of the work of the working group, and that he could find time to be with us. We are very grateful. Welcome, Director General. I wouldn't go through the list of people who have been mentioned here, and I can only mention my excitement by the kind of engagement that I'm seeing from everybody here, and also from the amazing work that Brother Ibrahim is doing. We go back a very long, very, very long way in fights for a society that can be rid of corruption, not only just for the sake of it, because the livelihood of many in our continent depends on how corrupt our countries are. So, true, it's a great thing to fight corruption, but in the end, we know that we are trying to make the life of others who are less fortunate better. Because in any society that corruption thrives, those who suffer the most are the weakest and the poorest. We should have that in mind. It is essential. And that is why I think the work that CoDA is now doing to actually, as a secretariat of the HLP, and I must at this point bring you the greetings of President Thabo Mbeki, who is the head of our panel, to all of you, and to thank you all for being here and contributing to the work that we are going to do, to implement the recommendations of the high-level panel. As I was saying then, the work of the high-level panel, and through its executing arm there, therefore CoDA, is just this. Is to break down what we're doing, making sure that we can get involvement of the citizenry so they can be aware of this. They can be aware. The conference, EITI conference, which is holding, it's under the theme, I think, at a crossroads or something like that, à la croisée du chemin, they say, in transition. It is true. It is true, because when EITI was conceived, it was conceived as a grouping of the Golden Triangle, I call it, civil society, oil companies, and extractive industry companies, and the governments. It has been what it has been, but we're seeing a new pattern, a pattern in which there is complicity between some of these companies and the governments themselves. So they have to look at the thing again, whether transparency can be gained by a system where you're asking, the fish to fry themselves. That's a very difficult thing to do. Another area, those of you who follow law closely, is the public-private partnerships. It is problematic in Africa because in many countries you have people in the public sector who actually have their own companies. So when they go to meet and discuss about public-private, two of those people are consumed by one person. So these are problems of integrity, and EITI is getting to that. And that really is the enigma about Glencore. Glencore is a sponsor company of EITI, and so many countries, I think 3 of the countries, I'm looking at my good brother and friend Ernest, because DRC is in EITI, my country Cameroon is EITI, and his country, the brother right there from Ivory Coast, is also in EITI. And the thing is, then how could these countries, with Glencore, be in a situation where there's such wide corruption So how is it that private jets can be hired with raw cash put into it and money flown to Sudan or flown to Cameroon to be given out as bribes? This is something out of, I don't know, a drug cartel novel or something like that. You know, it reminds me of a story that used to be told about an African who went to Switzerland to bank, I don't know what he went to do. He went to the Swiss bank and he told them, I want to see the bank manager. And the bank manager said, well, took him to the bank manager's office and he let him in and he said, can I have the names of all the Africans who have money in your bank? And the Swiss banker said, I cannot do that. His banker said, I just want the names. He said, I cannot do that. So he took out a gun and hurled the gun to the head of the Swiss banker. He said, please, I need those names now. The banker says, in this bank, do what you want, I cannot give the names. He put the gun back in his pocket and took out his suitcase. I like your bank. I have $6 million to bank here. So that is what it is. I thought it was a funny story, yes, but if in this day and age, you can have a company like Glencore go to Nigeria, hire a private jet, put in raw cash, fly it across the border to bribe people. That, if you are not shocked by that, then I don't know what we're all about. So I think tomorrow when we go into detail, we'll let around about Glencore and the other countries, and NSCC, our brother from Ivory Coast is here. We'll be able to discuss about this. I think this story should be told and retold. That's what I took the time, with the help of Professor Boko, who is there, and Souad, they will give you a key that has most of the court documents, the admissions from Glencore, all they said, and you'll have that in a key, so you can have that. And please don't worry about spreading it. People should know who these thieves are that impoverish us. So I know I'm standing between you and a coffee break or a tea break or cocoa pause, whatever you call it, but I think that we should put in the back of our minds, not the intellectual exercise, not the excitement of meeting, greeting, and discussing these matters, but that ultimately, the ultimate beneficiaries of this work are people who don't have roads, who don't have water, who struggle for hospitals, because that's what it is. The money they steal is the money that's not used to help our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Where there are preliminary remarks, there will always be preliminary thoughts, preliminary comments, preliminary questions. So before we take the tea, coffee break, if there is a comment or a question in the room, or just something, a comment to add on to what has been said, a clarification someone wants to seek, please, this is the time.
Moderator, I don't know, I would seek your indulgence and ask the Director General if he has a word to say. Yeah.
À Kérémounance et tous les membres du groupe, je vous souhaite la bienvenue au Sénégal. Un peu perturbé ces temps-ci, mais je pense que ça aussi, comme disait l'autre, c'est un peu de la douceur dans ce monde perturbé. C'est-à-dire nous retrouver ici pour discuter justement de la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites appliqués au secteur extractif. Je pense que c'est extrêmement important. L'enjeu en vaut la chandelle, comme disait l'autre aussi. Donc c'est un plaisir vraiment pour moi. Je m'excuse d'avance d'avoir accusé du retard pour participer à ces rencontres. Vous avez compris, soit avec les obligations au bureau et d'autres choses encore, je n'ai pas pu venir à temps. Mais c'est comme toujours, c'est un plaisir d'échanger sur ces grandes thématiques qui nous préoccupent. Akeremouna a parlé tout à l'heure de Glencore. On aura l'occasion justement, comme il l'a dit, demain, de débattre sur cette question en profondeur. Nous aurons aussi l'occasion de parler de la CAPA, la position africaine commune sur le recouvrement des avoirs, Et peut-être j'aurai aussi l'occasion d'échanger avec l'assistance sur l'apport des organismes, des structures comme l'ORAC, l'Office national commun des avoirs criminels, dans le cadre de la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites. Je pense que aussi c'est un vent nouveau qui a commencé à souffler, et le Sénégal est en quelque sorte le pionnier dans cette dynamique. Et l'ONRAC, à travers l'ONRAC, je pense qu'on pourrait aller dans le sens justement de l'implémentation de cette CAPAR, cette position africaine commune, qui contribuera sans nul doute à la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites. Donc merci pour ces mots préliminaires. En attendant donc qu'on entre dans le vif du sujet après la pause café. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur le modérateur. Je voulais juste demander une clarification suite à la présentation qui a été effectuée par Souad. Elle a évoqué la question de la mobilisation des ressources, mais surtout la question du secteur extractif. Qu'est-ce que concrètement le secrétariat ou bien le CAPAR fait sur le secteur extractif? Est-ce que vous avez eu à faire un travail de plaidoyer, de diagnostic, faire une situation de référence sur le secteur extractif en Afrique et en particulier dans le monde?
Thank you very much, Brahim. Alors, je vais peut-être passer au français. Mort ne va pas rigoler. Il y a, comme on le disait au début, chaque fois qu'il y a quelque chose d'important, c'est-à-dire qu'on continue à étudier tout et c'est toujours un exercice académique. On commence par la réflexion forcément et c'est pour ça qu'on collabore beaucoup plus avec les think tanks et les instituts de recherche en premier. Après, c'est une question de faire prévaloir les recommandations de ces exercices-là de réflexion pour qu'on puisse savoir exactement de quoi il retourne et qui doit faire quoi. Maintenant, c'était un groupe de travail qui a été démarré comme tous les autres, puisque justement le rapport du groupe de haut niveau disait bien depuis le début, et que ça continue à être le cas, que c'est le secteur des extractifs, c'est l'industrie des extractifs qui contribue le plus. Donc quand on est un pays riche en gaz, mines et pétrole, il y a plus de fluides. Donc, il y a quelque chose à faire là. L'attitude des multinationales quand elles viennent sur ce continent, c'est la même attitude que les gouvernements qui les abritent avaient quand ils venaient pour la colonisation. Ce n'est rien d'autre qu'un système bien ficelé, moderne, de ce qui avait justifié la colonisation, l'extractivisme, et ce qui justifie l'existence même de flux financiers illicites à la limite. Et alors, on est très inquiet, comme disait le bâtonnier, que cette nouvelle force maintenant qui vient aussi bien de l'Ouest que de l'Est cette fois-ci, et puis à l'Ouest ils parlent de Green Deal, ils veulent verdir ça, mais on va verdir la même attitude, on continue à confiner le continent dans un rôle de pourvoyeur de matériaux, et puis personne ne voit l'importance par exemple de la ZLECAf, de la zone de libre-échange qui demande que la transformation se fasse sur le continent. Jusqu'à 60% doivent se faire. Alors, on réfléchit d'abord, on regarde comment toutes ces décisions-là, depuis des années, les données que nous avons. Ce qui n'a pas été fait, par contre, Brahim, et tu as absolument raison, pour être plus concret et beaucoup moins académique, c'est de vérifier comment, par exemple, ces deux instruments les plus importants, l'ITIE et le TI, ce qu'ils font, parce qu'ils sont très actifs au niveau national. Et donc, ce sont des outils importants. Mais comment ça se fait que nous avons aujourd'hui cette conversation ici, tout le monde est là-bas et personne n'a parlé de Glencore? Ils sont tous venus en Afrique pour la première fois de leur existence. Ils se réunissent une fois tous les 3 ans. Il y a eu un scandale l'année dernière, en mai. Le monde entier le sait, c'est information publique. Mais voici un grand instrument qui se targue d'être l'instrument en or où ce travail-là devrait être fait, mais il ne dénonce même pas. Donc, de quoi on parle exactement? Donc, je suis moi-même sur un panel cet après-midi d'ailleurs, mais il faut qu'on examine et qu'on interroge ce qui se passe, parce que c'est pas très normal. Et donc, comme disait le bâtonnier, s'ils sont à la croisée des chemins, il faut qu'ils nous disent, en tant que continent, parce qu'après qu'il y ait eu le scandale Glencore, qui est le premier scandale de cette ampleur, ils viennent sur le continent et ils sponsorisent. Alors, si ce n'est pas pour nous narguer, on ne sait pas ce que ça veut dire, parce qu'il y a quelque chose qui ne vole pas. Donc, il faudra qu'on questionne ça de façon structurée, organisée. Et puis, il ne faut pas jeter l'eau sale du bain et les bébés avec. Il faudra peut-être déterminer comment ils vont réorganiser les choses et valider ça. Donc, on va travailler avec eux. Donc, ce groupe de travail sur les extractifs, il a été écrasé et il va être recomposé. On va définitivement inviter l'ITIE et l'IE à en faire partie. Il faudrait qu'on ait une façon structurée et organisée de leur parler. On aura des études communes. Il faudra qu'on valide si les données et les analyses qu'ils font de ces données-là sont effectivement, comme disait le bâtonnier, nous permettront de voir ce qui se passe, quelle est la situation. Parce que si on le laisse à des organisations internationales qui, pour la plupart, sont basées en Occident, et ils ont une attitude avec notre leadership, nos institutions et nos solutions qu'ils ne peuvent pas prendre en charge forcément. Donc, il faudra que notre perspective soit amenée, mais de la façon la plus valable, aussi bien du point de vue de la recherche que des données qu'il faut qu'on valide. Comme je disais, comme le panel doit aller dans 22 pays africains, on a le financement de la BAD. On vient d'avoir, hier d'ailleurs, les autres ont complémenté. Donc, on va y aller. Si on va couvrir 22 pays africains et qu'on va se concentrer sur le secteur des extractifs, il faudra bien que ce que nous, on va dire, et ce que l'ITIE ou le TI disent, soit en concordance. Sinon, il y en a un de nous qui ne fait pas du travail. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. J'espère que c'est un peu plus concret, oui.
Je peux, avant de passer la parole à moi, en fait, ce que tu viens de dire, Souad, c'est le fait que ces évaluations qu'on va faire vont peut-être nous amener à voir plus clair et aussi à associer, n'est-ce pas, les partenaires qui sont ici à ce processus sur le plan local. Évidemment, les autres vannes que nous avons ouvertes, c'est de passer par les évaluations du MAEP, les PRM. C'est pour ça d'ailleurs qu'on a l'outil ici qui est le focal point. Il n'est pas là pour distribuer les clés, mais en fait c'est un focal point du MAEP, et aussi bien sûr et ABC qui est un processus d'évaluation. Ce sont des structures que nous allons essayer de travailler avec pour pouvoir aller, n'est-ce pas, vers le fond, n'est-ce pas, des choses. C'est ce que je voudrais ajouter. Je pense que moi, vous voulez dire quelque chose là.
En fait, par rapport à la question qui a été posée, en plus de ce que Souad et Baris ont dit sur la question, je pense que c'est extrêmement important aussi de considérer les liens qui devraient exister dans l'implémentation de la CAPAR et les industries extractives. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, peut-être cet après-midi, je pense, ou après la pause, on va faire voilà, donc l'atelier sur la CAPAR. Mais ce qui est fondamental est que quand j'ai eu l'information qu'il y a ce colloque, ça m'a fait penser à un livre que j'avais acheté. Et ce livre parle exactement de la question qui a été posée tout à l'heure par mon ami Birahim Seck. Corruption, évitement fiscal, blanchiment dans le secteur extractif. Ouais. Donc tous les éléments, tous les ingrédients qui sont liés justement au flux financier illicite, liés au secteur extractif, au sens de la criminalité, c'est-à-dire infractions commises par ceux qui sont dans le secteur, tout ça, c'est un condensé de ces réponses, de ces éléments de réponse. Entre l'implémentation de la CAPAR et le secteur extractif. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, on ne peut pas parler de transparence dans le secteur extractif, définir des normes est justement qu'il y ait des infractions relevées, essentiellement des infractions de corruption, y compris des infractions de blanchiment de capitaux, et donc qui est victime. Et là, donc, ça pose aussi la problématique de l'affaire Glencore. Donc je pense que c'est fondamental de lier cette CAPAR avec le secteur extractif, avec d'autres secteurs d'ailleurs. Chaque fois qu'un secteur peut générer, dans le cadre de la commission des infractions, des revenus au préjudice de qui? Au préjudice, n'est-ce pas, d'un continent, au préjudice du pays, je pense qu'on peut toujours justement faire ce lien, donc une vue plus ou moins holistique de la chose. Merci.
Very much for those comments. Yeah, go ahead. Let's have one more comment.
Moi, c'est juste une question ou deux questions, quoi. Je vais poser une question. Je peux y aller? Voilà, c'est pour savoir si la CAPA est l'opérationnalité. Et combien a été déjà récupéré, effectivement, si elle est opérationnelle? Est-ce qu'on a une estimation plus ou moins exhaustive de ce qui sort? C'est par rapport à ça qu'on pourra savoir si ce qu'on a récupéré, si la CAPA est vraiment efficace. Je vous remercie.
J'ai compris votre question, mais CAPA à la base, c'est pour donner un cadre juridique, n'est-ce pas, qui permet à chaque État de développer. Donc ce n'est pas une agence de recouvrement transcontinentale, c'est une structure, c'est ça qu'on appelle position commune. N'est-ce pas, pour aider les pays à avoir eux-mêmes des structures qui permettent, n'est-ce pas, de procéder au recouvrement. C'est pour ça l'expérience des personnes comme le directeur général sont vraiment capitales dans ce processus. Donc ce n'est pas vous amener le poisson, mais c'est vous donner l'hameçon. Merci.
It quickly. Recovery is as good as asset tracing is good. We must know what went, where it is, for us to now even start the hustle of going through, yes. And just to give an idea of the implications, I'm glad that Nigeria's outfit that has been dealing with this is in the room, because it's the only country on this continent that has put that much force in trying to recover. The agency, that specific agency, has 2,100 staff, full-time staff dealing with that, and even that, they recover half of the Benin masks only. So it is not an easy task. We were lately told that for us to even study properly what it takes to trace assets, if you are an African government, you will need between $150,000 to $600,000 per month. So we are not talking about easy tasks, and poor countries cannot do it. The idea, and you're absolutely right, sir, is to say, what is this CAPAR going to deliver for the country concretely? Can it deliver at least a public good that a poor country can use, both for technical support and financial support to actually do that? And that's where everything lies. And I am glad that Moore is here. He's a member of the working group, and he will be able to give clarifications later.
Madam Charity, please.
In addition to what has already been said with respect to CAPA, I'd also wanted to indicate that there are certain provisions in there which member states are supposed to be doing, but in terms of the actual implementation or the actual rolling of it on ground is yet to happen. There are certain mechanisms even at the level of the African Union that we hope to be able to put in place, working together with stakeholders. So it's a process, it's a journey, and we haven't yet gotten to where we ought to be, but we are hoping that with small steps, incremental steps, one at a time, we'll be able to put in place certain mechanisms that will address the different pillars of CAPA, which I hope to be able to speak to in the presentation, and then we can also get the actual experience of some people that have actually recovered some assets, perhaps not necessarily using CAPA, but using the other methods, and then we can lean on those experiences and then build on in terms of mechanisms at the continental level to be able to use in the recovery of the different assets. Thank you.
Charity, so let's have one final comment, and then we will take a break. Please go right ahead.
Oui, bonjour. Je pose la question en tant que journaliste. C'est une question à deux niveaux. Le premier niveau, c'est est-ce que la CAPAR n'est pas victime un peu de sa posture d'organe de l'Union africaine. Et je pose la question par rapport au lien qu'il peut y avoir entre cette posture-là d'organe de l'Union africaine et un peu les pressions entre guillemets qu'elle pourrait exercer sur des États qui sont souverains. Est-ce que la CAPA a les moyens d'aller au-delà d'aller à la limite de la souveraineté qui est définie, par exemple, comme au niveau du Sénégal, des politiques de recouvrement ou de récupération des biens. Le deuxième niveau, c'est par rapport au niveau national. Est-ce que nos organismes, au niveau national, je peux prendre le cas de l'ONRAC, est-ce que nos organismes peuvent valablement faire le travail? Est-ce qu'ils peuvent être crédibles si on sait la tutelle politique qui pèse sur eux? Je prends le cas de l'ONRAC. Je pense que l'année dernière, vers décembre, je pense que l'ONRAC a publié un communiqué pour faire un peu l'état statistique, j'allais dire, des recouvrements. Il avait dit qu'il avait récupéré peut-être 600 ou 700 millions en numéraire et 1 milliard, je crois, de francs CFA en biens divers. Maintenant, moi, ce qui m'inquiète, c'est un peu quelle est la marge de manœuvre d'indépendance de l'ONRAC quand on sait que le directeur général de l'ONRAC est nommé par, oui je vois, je ne le connais pas mais je vois, le directeur général de l'ONRAC au Sénégal est nommé par le président de la République. Est-ce que dans ce schéma-là, est-ce que les documents de l'ONRAC s'adressent directement au président de la République ou bien est-ce qu'ils s'adressent au public? C'est juste ça ma question.
Oui, je réponds, parce que je pense qu'il a posé deux questions, mais je réponds à la question qui est liée à l'ONRAC. Bon, la première précision, c'est que l'ONRAC, quant à leur nomination, nous savons tous que c'est le président qui nomme aux emplois civils et militaires. En fait, ce n'est pas parce que vous êtes nommé par décret que vous êtes intimement lié ou vous êtes soumis, justement, aux ordres des institutions. En fait, la différence pour ce qui est de l'ONRAC, c'est que déjà, celui qui occupe le poste de directeur général, il est déjà profilé par les textes. Il est précisé que c'est un magistrat et il a un mandat. Ensuite, les actes que pose l'ONRAC, en vérité, ne sont pas, c'est plus à la limite même des actes plus ou moins quasi-judiciaires. Notre mission principale, c'est, je ne veux pas anticiper, bon, je vais essayer de résumer, mais notre mission principale, c'est de gérer les avoirs qui sont saisis et confisqués et de procéder à leur recouvrement. Et dans le cadre de cette mission, notre travail fondamental, c'est d'assister les autorités judiciaires, la police judiciaire, les outiller, renforcer leurs capacités dans la détection d'abord, mais l'identification des avoirs pour que le crime qui génère un produit, qu'on puisse identifier ce produit et que ce produit puisse être neutralisé pour que demain, s'il y a une décision de confiscation, que cette confiscation puisse être matérialisée, que cette confiscation soit effective. Parce que ce que nous avons constaté, c'est que si vous avez fréquenté les unités de police et de gendarmerie, mais vous voyez que des véhicules, des biens s'y amoncellent. Vous allez dans les salles de scellés aussi, vous voyez que justement il y a des biens qui s'y amoncellent et même des biens qui n'ont pas été gérés parce que tout simplement il n'y avait pas un organe qui avait cette fonction, cette mission essentielle. Donc l'ONRAC a justement cette mission d'organiser ou de réorganiser les choses dans ce sens. Et pour ce qui est justement du recouvrement, justement j'avais dit que déjà en décembre, il y avait 700 millions qui ont été recouvrés en numéraire et en biens, je veux dire, en nature, estimés à plus d'1 milliard. C'est exactement la même chose. Mais à ce niveau, il faut considérer deux choses. Ces avoirs, il y a des procédures qui sont en cours et des procédures qui sont devenues définitives, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a une peine de confiscation qui est prononcée pour l'ensemble de ces procédures. Donc pour les biens qui sont saisis, ces biens, ces montants, à la suite par exemple des ventes aux enchères, ces montants sont consignés à la CDC, à la Caisse de dépôt et consignation. Donc l'État, personne ne peut y toucher parce que la procédure n'est pas encore définitive. S'il y a une décision de confiscation, ces montants seront reversés dans les caisses de l'État ou s'il y a lieu procéder à l'indemnisation de la partie civile. On aura le temps en tout cas de développer davantage pour que vous compreniez un peu le fonctionnement, mais en tout cas, pour vous rassurer, il ne peut pas y avoir cette interaction ou cette mémise justement de l'autorité politique dans le fonctionnement en tant que tel que c'est organisé au sein de l'ordre. Parce qu'on ne peut pas vous dire, écoutez, cet argent, on va aller peut-être récupérer ça pour gérer des aspects politiques. Non, c'est la destination. Prenez, si vous avez le temps, de parcourir un peu les textes qui organisent la structure, vous vous rendrez compte qu'en fait, c'est à la limite une structure quasi-judiciaire, donc dont les fonctions essentiellement, c'est d'assurer la gestion optimale des avoirs saisis confisqués.
J'ai juste une question de relance. Encore que je ne sois pas convaincu un peu sur l'absence de lien politique entre la nomination et un peu l'action future. Mais ça, c'est un autre débat peut-être. Moi, la question de relance que je voulais poser, c'est par rapport, il y a quelque temps, des personnalités politiques, des politiciens de la place ont été cités comme détenant plusieurs centaines de millions chez eux. Est-ce que vous intervenez à ce niveau-là?
Pour la réponse courte, nous n'intervenons pas. Nous ne faisons pas de saisie, nous ne faisons pas de confiscation. Nous gérons, nous facilitons la saisie et nous gérons les biens qui sont saisis et nous gérons les biens qui sont confisqués. Donc tout ce qui est poursuite, c'est l'autorité judiciaire. Pour la réponse courte.
Thank you, my brother Moore, and thank you for those questions and that probing. Certainly, we expect that the journalists in the room, you keep asking us the hard questions so that we do not get too comfortable with what we consider as the good work that we've done. Yeah, so that you push our thinking for us to get better in these processes. But there was the first question with regards to sovereignty versus a common position and joint action. Is the common position and joint action a threat to national sovereignty? Is it better, or is it better for countries each to act on their own? Please, President Akaramu.
I'm very excited about this external display of the love of sovereignty by Africans. When everything else they do betrays that is the least of their worries. But that being said, it is a common position. It's one of adherence, one that tells you what you could do. If you think that it affects your sovereignty, so be it. And I think that in international legal practice and in international diplomacy, really, each time you get into any kind of multilateral or bilateral arrangement, you have to accept the fact that your sovereignty takes a little chip because you want to work in a concerted action. But I think now on the continent, each time an African country is in difficulty in doing what is right, the first argument is, well, this is not respecting our sovereignty. So that I think, to me, I don't think the problem of sovereignty is posed with CAPA, because CAPA is just a common position. It's like a draft uniform act, like a model uniform act that you can accept or refuse. We refuse here. Thank you.
Very much for that very lively introductory session. We take a break now, and I propose that because if we can come back at 11:30, is that fair to sorry? Is it fair to say 11:30? We get back? How many minutes would you like? 26? let's, yeah, 11:30 will be fair, I think. And I hope everyone has received what we were informed we would get, the flash discs or the sticks with the information. I'm hoping, perhaps, I'm supposing that it has a translation instrument inherent in it, or is it just in English?
No, actually, yes. You will see 2 folders and a sets of documents. One folder has Glencore case documents, everything that Barrister Muna and his teams have validated, and these are in both languages. Then there is another folder called CoDA and HLP. These are reports like the high-level partners report in both languages, the Common African Position in both languages, and other documents. Then there are the documents of this conference, the concept note, the agenda, and so on. That's what you have in those places.
Thank you. Let's enjoy our break. Yeah. Thank you.